The Pinkertons, Chapter 7. In the excitement and busyness of the final couple of days leading up to the wedding, Cynthia had largely forgotten about her peculiar Thursday at the market. She had spoken to Claude about it that evening, but she had spoken in broad terms because she wanted to keep the new shoes as a surprise. She liked the shoes, and after all, they were just shoes. She was now convinced that there was nothing strange about them. Claude had listened carefully, and when Cynthia had finished her retelling of the event, he had patted her shoulder gently and intoned in his slow, slightly lilting voice, There, my dear, don't you worry. That is a strange tale that you've told, and no mistaking. But don't you be fretting about it. There's no real harm done. You're safe and well, and that's the main thing." And that just about summed it up for both of them. Cynthia felt reassured by Claude's little speech, simple though it was. By the by, I should perhaps point out that Claude's words sounded rather different in the guinea pig tongue to the English translation I have included above. In guinea pig, the speech involved lots of cooing sounds, interspersed with other gently soothing noises. Even had these sounds been bereft of any meaning whatsoever, such melodious undulations would have been bound to warm any heart, to make anyone feel better. And so, Cynthia feeling duly restored, the conversation fell back into its ubiquitous rut, that of going over, again and again, the final plans for the wedding. Soon it was Saturday. The big day had dawned. All the guests had arrived in the neighbourhood, including Hector and Anne, who had left their factory in the capable paws of one of Anne's nieces. The ceremony was beautiful and quiet and simple, just as a guinea pig wedding ceremony is supposed to be. Vows were exchanged, lovingly and sincerely, and Claude presented his bride with the gift he had been working on, the clover-shaped bronze charm. Cynthia was delighted with it, but not quite as much as she was delighted with her new husband. The ceremony over, the guinea pigs gathered for photographs and then for the reception. Despite having looked at various venues, Cynthia and Claude had, in the end, decided to get married in Haypepper itself, the place where they would begin their married life together, and where they hoped, if they were blessed that way, they might one day raise a family. There were no hotels or restaurants in Haypepper. The ceremony took place in the tiny old stone chapel, and afterwards the couple invited their guests to join them for celebrations on the village green. Luckily the weather was kind, and the whole area was once again bathed in sunshine, but it was not too hot. There was a gentle breeze. Of course, the green was where Haypepper Market was held, but Cynthia was untroubled by any difficult memories. She was caught up in all the delight and loveliness of the celebrations. There was no sign of the tepee, and indeed no sign of any of the other stalls either, as these were always packed away at the end of each market day. For the rest of the time, the green was mainly used by children playing and older guinea pigs out for their daily constitutionals. But today it was transformed. Several colourful rugs covered much of the grass, and a small wooden platform had been erected off to one side to serve as a stage for the band later on when the dancing would begin. In the middle of each rug was a large wicker hamper provided by Cleaver's Caterers. Each hamper was full to the brim with the savoury delicacies to which guinea pigs are most partial. And after these had been devoured, a young, rather round and pretty guinea pig, barely out of girlhood, wearing a white apron trimmed with frills, was seen. This guinea pig was going to and fro between the groups on the rugs, with a round tray strapped to her back, distributing drinks and desserts. I don't know whether you have already guessed it, but this guinea pig was actually a very youthful Mimi Mihaela, long before she went on to become the successful businesswoman and confectioner that we now think of her as. The bride and groom circulated amongst their guests. Some young guinea pigs came out to play tig on the green and found their usual playing space to be otherwise occupied, so they decided to stay and join in the merriments. Claude and Cynthia didn't mind, and were welcoming and courteous to both their invited and their uninvited guests. As Claude and Cynthia neared each group in turn, everyone would cheer and scatter confetti over the heads of the bride and groom. Guinea pig confetti is made of dried kernels of maize. Each time the couple would smile and then stoop down to nibble at a few of the kernels. This was, of course, the polite thing to do, as any well-bred guinea pig knows you are supposed to eat the confetti at a wedding and not merely throw it about. Finally, everyone had had their fill. Even Hector announced that he didn't think he could manage a 7th slice of wedding cake, a splendid carrot and hay affair. The band struck up its first tune and the dancing began. Now, I feel that as the responsible author, which I hope to be, I should perhaps point out that dancing immediately after eating a large meal is not necessarily the best idea if one wants to avoid indigestion. But you have to understand that most of the guests had finished their meal a good hour and a half before the band began to play. It is just that they had all been waiting, and very politely too, I must say, for Hector Fleuret to finish his meal. You will no doubt be pleased to hear that Hector himself refrained from dancing. I would like to be able to attribute this to his good sense, but in truth it was because he had fallen asleep. For it is not only the scent of joss sticks in a magical tent that can make you sleepy. A good meal can be similarly soporific. All the colourful rugs were now being cleared away to make room for the dancing, but none of the guinea pigs felt that they should move Hector. He looked so comfortable. So in the end they left him exactly where he was, asleep on a rug. His wife tucked a second rug over the top of him to keep him nice and cosy, for the sun was now beginning to go down and the air was cooling a little. Then the guinea pigs all began to dance around Hector on his rug, as if Hector were the guinea pig equivalent of a maypole. Some of the guests had brought ribbons and tambourines with them to add to the fun. These were distributed amongst the company, until it was a very happy and festive little group indeed. Guinea pigs can't very easily dance and play the tambourine simultaneously. Well, not in the way that you or I might be able to do. For as a species, guinea pigs don't in reality resort to anthropomorphic bipedalism when dancing, whatever they may or may not do in novels. To put it another way, guinea pigs dance on 4 paws and not on 2. So in order for the tambourines to be played, they were strapped onto the sides of some of the guests, mostly the young males, and then the other guinea pig dancers would gently bosh the tambourines with their noses as they went past. They tried to do this in time with the music. They largely failed, but this only produced laughter, and it all added to the general joy and fun of the occasion. Cynthia had donned her new shoes as planned, and Claude had duly admired these, with only a minimal amount of prompting from his new wife. Several of the other dancers had also changed into shoes. As you probably know, most of the time guinea pigs are either bare-pawed or, if they do wear shoes or boots, then they only wear them on their back paws. This is not because they like to walk around two-legged, of course, but because they like to have their front paws ready and unshod just in case. You may be wondering, just in case what? But truth be told, I don't think I know the answer to that. Perhaps it is in case they come across a piece of broccoli or even a wedding hamper full of delights. I suppose it might be tricky to eat with shoes covering your front paws, even if you are a guinea pig and your paws have much less to do with the manoeuvring and eating of food than the nose and the mouth do. The dancing was soon well underway. At first the band had stuck to quiet, gentle, lilting melodies, as they did not wish to disturb Hector. But as the bride's sleeping father showed no sign of stirring, gradually the pace and the volume of the tunes increased. It was all instrumental music, although this was nothing to do with the Pinkertons' rule, because, remember, this is all before the rule was even invented. Cynthia had booked 2 local musicians to play, a drummer and a tin whistle player. Both were guinea pigs. There was no vocalist. The tin whistle player alternated between that instrument and, presumably at the points when he needed to catch his breath, strumming on a pink and purple striped banjo. This banjo matched his shiny new suit bought specially for the occasion. The band gave enthusiastic instrumental renditions of a number of folk melodies to the delight of the dancers. There was a pause in the music. One of the guests had gone up to speak to the musicians, to request a particular song. Follow the Yellow Brick Road from The Wizard of Oz was not a common request for weddings, but nonetheless, after rummaging for a few moments in a pile, Minnie, the drummer, triumphantly pulled out a dog-eared and slightly crumpled piece of paper, which she handed over to her brother, Mickey. He placed it on his music stand, squinted at it a bit, and then began to play. Soon many of the guests were joining in, not just tapping with their feet, but also joining in with their voices, in song. And that, dear reader, is when and where it happened. There, on Haypepper Village Green, during the dancing following the wedding of Cynthia Florette and Claude Pinkerton. Cynthia and Claude found themselves lifted up in the air, as if on a sudden strong gust of wind. But it was not only them, it was the musicians too, and Mimi Mahala, and Madame Anne Florette, and the still sleeping Monsieur Hector Florette, and indeed all the other wedding guests, both invited and uninvited. All of them were lifted up in the air and transported suddenly and inexplicably to Oz. And I don't mean Australia, as Patty and Percival later came to assume. No, I mean Oz. Yes, Oz, as in Wizard of. And that had been how Claude and Cynthia had spent their first holiday together, their honeymoon, in fact. It had hardly been romantic or intimate. In fact, they hadn't had any time alone together at all, as they had accidentally taken with them Cynthia's parents and also half the inhabitants of the village. Claude and Cynthia had felt both bemused but also responsible in some way for what had happened. After all, this had happened at their wedding, not at anybody else's. In Oz, they had to spend all their time running around between various embassies, passport offices and hotels, trying to explain their predicament and organise guinea pig appropriate food, accommodation, travel documents and homeward passage for their fellow travellers, with varying degrees of success. The couple tried to see the funny side of the situation, of course, but still, it was not an experience that they wished to repeat unnecessarily. They never got to the bottom of what had happened and why. Perhaps it was something to do with the song, Follow the Yellow Brick Road. That seemed too much of a coincidence to be, well, merely a coincidence. But then again, thought Cynthia, maybe it was the shoes. Maybe there was something strange about them after all. When Claude and Cynthia finally made it home, tired and exhausted, but pleased to be back in Haypepper, Cynthia placed the shoes at the bottom of her closet. And in time, she forgot about them. It was Claude, meanwhile, who still, of course, didn't really know much about the shoes and the provenance of the shoes, who suggested the introduction of a household rule, the no music with words rule that we've already heard so much about. Claude felt that this was a necessary precaution. The whole experience had been, frankly, a bit of a disaster, and Claude had no desire for any repeat performances. He was not keen on adventures. He would much prefer a quiet life.